Hurricanes by Seymour Simon. Hurricanes are huge spinning storms that develop in warm areas around the equator. Hurricanes bring strong winds, heavy rains, storm surges, flooding, and sometimes even tornadoes. Coastal areas and islands are in the most danger during a hurricane, but even inland areas are at risk. Hurricane season along the east coast of the United States begins in June and continues until the end of November. The peak hurricane months are August and September. The East Coast averages about 5 hurricanes a year. In other parts of the world, hurricanes happen year-round. The word hurricane comes from people who lived in the tropics in earlier times and saw the terrible destruction and great loss of life these storms can bring. The ancient Mayan people of South and Central America called their storm god Unraken. An evil god of the Taino people of the Caribbean was called Huracan. Hurricanes are one of 3 kinds of storms called tropical cyclones. Tropical means that the storms form over the warm waters of the tropics near the equator. Cyclones are storms spinning around a calm center of low air pressure. Cyclones spin counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere and clockwise in the southern hemisphere. Tropical depressions are cyclones of clouds and thunderstorms that spin around a central area. They have steady wind speeds of 38 miles per hour or less. Tropical storms are cyclones of heavy clouds and strong thunderstorms that spin at steady wind speeds of 39 to 73 miles per hour. Hurricanes are the strongest tropical cyclones. They have steady winds of 74 miles per hour or higher. When these storms form over the North Atlantic, Caribbean Sea, Gulf of Mexico, or West Coast of Mexico, they are called hurricanes. In the North Pacific, these kinds of storms are called typhoons, and in the Indian Ocean, they are called cyclones. Hurricanes are the only weather disasters that have been given their own names, such as Andrew, Camille, Floyd, Fran, Hugo, Irene, Katrina, Opal, and Rita. In some ways, all hurricanes are alike, but like people, each hurricane has its own story. All hurricanes form in the same way. They begin in the warm, moist atmosphere over tropical ocean waters. First, the atmosphere gathers heat energy through contact with ocean waters that are above 80 degrees Fahrenheit to a depth of about 200 feet. Next, moisture evaporating from the warm waters enters the atmosphere and begins to power the infant hurricane. The growing hurricane forms bands of clouds and winds near the ocean surface that spiral air inward. The air is heated by warm ocean water, creating strong winds and forcing them to rise higher. This increases the power of the hurricane and leads to stormy conditions over huge areas. Hurricanes can easily last more than a week and may strike Caribbean islands days before whirling north and west into the United States. This satellite photo shows the bands of thunderstorm clouds spiraling in toward a hurricane's center, or eye. The eye of a hurricane is fairly calm, with light winds and few clouds. But if you are in the eye of a hurricane and you think the worst is over, be warned. The most violent winds and heaviest rains take place in the eye wall, the ring of clouds and thunderstorms closely surrounding the eye. At the top of the eye wall, about 50,000 feet, most of the air pushes outward and then falls like water from a fountain, but always spinning in a counterclockwise direction in the northern hemisphere. When a hurricane grows to full strength, it can kick up waves 50 feet or higher in open ocean waters. Every second, a large hurricane moves more than 1 million cubic miles of atmosphere. A typical hurricane can dump from 6 inches to over a foot of rain across a region. Hurricane forecasts estimate when the eye will pass over a particular location. But even a small hurricane has damaging winds and rains that may arrive many hours before the eye. A storm surge is a huge dome of water, 50 to 100 miles wide, that sweeps across a coastline where a hurricane makes land. A storm tide is a combination of a storm surge and a regular monthly high tide. When they come together, water heights are at their greatest. In September 1900, a deadly hurricane swept over the port town of Galveston, Texas. It caused the worst storm tide in United States history. The streets were flooded to depths of 15 feet and higher. Winds gusted to more than 100 miles per hour, ripping off roofs and uprooting trees. Huge chunks of buildings flew through the air. Before the hurricane struck, Galveston had been a beautiful city of large homes and broad streets. After the storm, it was a scene of utter destruction. The storm killed at least 12,000 people and swept thousands of homes into the sea. Ships were left stranded and wrecked miles from their moorings. Even the shoreline had changed. It was now 300 feet inland from where it had been before the storm. Since then, Galveston has built a seawall that has protected the city from the force of storm tides.